What does it take to be an effective community organizer? How can the Filipino community maximize on the resources available versus double dipping on the already depleting resources? Why should young Philams even care about the issues happening in the Philippines? These are just some of the questions that I, Rochelle Ocampo, will be tackling with my fellow co-hosts, Jen Fuhrer and Christina Pastor, on this month's episode of Makilala TV, the Grassroots Organizer, balancing passion, personal ethics, and paychecks. Our first guest, Stephen Raga, is currently a senior associate for multicultural leadership at AARP. He serves as the New York State chairperson for the National Federation of Filipino American Associations, also known as NAFA, and the Northeast Deputy Director for the Filipino World War II Veterans Education and Recognition Project. Also, the board chair of Filipino American Unity for Progress, UNIPRO, among dozen other current and past leadership roles in the New York metro area. Our other special guest speaker is Jves Lawrence C. Nibungco. Jves was born and raised in the Philippines and migrated here to the US in 2005. He started as an urban poor organizer in the Philippines and currently the national chairperson of Anak Bayan USA. He's also one of the founding coordinators of Kapit Bisig Kabataan Network and organizes with Filipino Immigrants and Workers Organizing Project, also known as FIOS. Thank you both for joining us on our episode. Now, I identify myself as a community leader and have been personally questioned for the amount of work that I put into the community. Basically, someone straight up told me that I wasn't doing enough because I chose to go to a family event rather than represent at a community event. My first questions for you are, how would you define activism? Is there a particular amount of organizing that would constitute as the right amount? Jves, we could start with you.
Well, I mean, technically activism is, when you believe in a cause and you actively, take actions to promote the cause, and it takes various forms. And, I think there's not really a set, like measurement of like what's enough. It's more on like the impact of the things that you do, and if your impact is good and, then that means you're doing enough activism, I
So
believe.
based on that definition, Makilala is a form of activism.
Is it?
I didn't want to go into that self-serving question.
No, good job.
And maybe let's hear from Steve.
Definitely, I agree. I think when you're talking about activism, words play an important role and are powerful. I think you have to bring in what do you define as activism, what do you define as advocacy, and what do you define as organizing, leadership, all of that play an important role, because it could be the same thing for one person and totally different for another. I think definitely if you're saying organizing, I think if you want to say Makilala, yeah, you're here on a Saturday morning doing this when you don't have to. It's a big thing. Again, what is good enough? How many hours in a day or in a week is good enough? Again, agree, it's the impact, but I would say a more a measured impact. What is the metric? And that it's a targeted impact. Like, again, not like, oh, okay, we passed a certain goal line, but that you targeted exactly the result of that outcome.
I like one of the questions of Rochelle, like, why would Filipino American people worry about the issues in the
Philippines? Can somebody explain that to us? Because I ask myself that question a lot.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us encounter that question, and I think it's really important to understand and trace, why are we here in the United States in the first place, right? Most of us, actually 6,000 Filipinos leave the country every day due to poverty and the lack of economic opportunity, and that is why, there's a Phil-Am community, right? And based on that, I think it's inseparable for Filipinos, Filipino Americans, or here in the United States.
But the 6,000 you mentioned, they're not all coming to the U.S., are
No,
they?
but majority, the number one destination is the United States. We're the biggest concentration of Filipinos outside of the Philippines. 4 million, more or less.
So Filipino people come here in big numbers. So we have a life here. Why should we worry about their lives there? Well, they have their own activists there. That sounds obnoxious, but then let's go ahead.
I know, but my whole family left.
Yeah.
And we just came back, part of them. But we left because we couldn't make a living. And we want to have a better future for the next generation. And I don't know if being, in tune with politics or whatever from
Yeah.
the Philippines really affect my family. I mean, I'm just asking you a question.
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
saying.
Me too.
Okay, Steven.
I'll go two ways. I think
Yeah.
that the politics in the Philippines can affect your family, and the politics here can affect the Philippines. To answer your point, whoever the election is next year, right, or this year now, both here and in the Philippines, it's a
Correct.
big year for civic engagement and election year on the federal level. Whoever is in charge of the Philippines, whatever policies or initiatives they're going to push, can affect their labor and the labor export and immigration into America, into other countries, like Jves was saying. So if that happens, and there's an influx of more Filipino Americans here, or Filipino immigrants, that's going to directly affect, they're probably going to move into Filipino communities. That's going to affect your numbers there. And that's going to either be positive or detrimental in how you see it, and how the local government, national government treats them, and how we affect the Philippines. That's another thing. I mean, what happens here in America, what advocates or either Filipino immigrants or Filipino Americans here, whatever we say impacts heavily in the Philippines, because like you say, maybe some people are thinking the same thing. Why would they care about us in the
Correct.
Philippines? Oh, they do? Why? And then that can just open a discussion how we are a global community here.
Well, do they only care about us here in the U.S.? I mean, they meaning the peoples in the Philippines, because we're sending money over there. Like we're always helping our family members by sending monthly monetary
Remittances, yeah.
contributions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's the only benefit of us being here and sending, financially, then why should we involve in being active, in your activism?
I mean, I think it's like also
advocacies?
priority. Like some people just don't feel like that they should care about something that they don't think directly affects. So again, it's all about like their perception.
Right. So I'm asking Steve and Yves. I mean, what is it about your upbringing that makes you so passionate about being active as opposed to maybe just create something or innovate? Or maybe they're the same. Maybe they're being innovators and being activists are kind of the same. So
A quick point on that. I forgot where I read it a few months ago. This could be a magazine or the Times, I forget. But now that millennials are actually, instead of going through the traditional way of organizing or protesting on the streets, have become, at least in America, I think, have become a bit taken opposite views on that. Instead of going to tech to change and disrupt the current status of political or social, economic. So that's it. But to your point on how do we connect what you're bringing there and from the Philippines and here, that's I think that's going to be impactful for this year in 2016. So a lot of people need to actually get more involved and make sure that there's consequences that could happen from this year.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of factors. It's not just one reason why we need to get involved in Philippine issues. Another, aside from the historical factor that the reason why we're here is because of the policies in the Philippines and the colonial relationship of the Philippines and the United States. Another factor is that even as Filipino Americans who pay taxes here, $50 million of our tax money is being sent to the Philippines to fund corrupt and Philippine military that's been accused or came out as a violator of human rights, even based on the United Nations reports on human rights. And do we really want that as Filipino Americans? Our tax money funding human rights violations in the Philippines is another factor. And third factor is we have a lot of family members still back home, and policies there affect us here. When their lives become harder in the Philippines, we have to send more money, or you become worried,
Right.
when the typhoon Haiyan
Right.
happened and the Philippine government did not do
That is,
enough.
I think that's one of the
you know?
most, what's one of the issues that really resonates between our country, between Filipinos in the U.S. and Filipinos in the Philippines when there is a typhoon.
It's so strange that was such a defining moment in our community.
But issues like, I'm sorry to say, and I don't really feel this way, human rights violations of the military, that does not resonate among Filipino Americans, does
why?
it? Why do we have a Black Lives Matter that is so effective and we can't create something similar within our community? That's
But
what
are
I'd like
are
to
the
know.
Filipinos being oppressed
here
in the U.S. and affect the Philippines?
Probably that's why.
believe
It does
so.
not resonate as much
at least directly.
And
Not- yeah.
the protests that we're doing, are they really affecting the policies in the Philippines, or every family's problems are solved by the family within, and not then the policies of the government aren't really making any change? I'm just asking this question.
Sure. I mean, I can give an example. During the Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo administration, back in from 2001 to 2009, the spike in human rights violations, killings pretty much every week of community leaders, activists, right?
And journalists.
And journalists,
that
one
was
of the
like
biggest.
10 years ago?
Yeah.
Just
and-
It's still going on. Yeah.
Okay.
And what you call this, because the United States, send military aid to the Philippines, basically has a lot of influence in the Philippines. Filipino Americans lobbied to cut the U.S. military aid, and it resulted in a drastic, of course, it didn't resolve the human rights crisis in
Yeah,
the Philippines,
yeah.
but it did decline, and the Philippine government has to respond. And this is just one example where we, as Filipino Americans or the Filipino community here in the United States, can really make a lot of impact.
Are you really making impact? Do you think you are?
Yeah, and I think, a lot of this is, of course, how many laws did you pass? But on a day-to-day basis, our organizations that we build, becomes, usually the first contact of undocumented immigrants who've been isolated, and this are, becomes the support network of, a lot of Filipino migrants, So I think on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of impact. And even on the legislative or any other policy level, I think, we are making an impact.
I think it's a huge, what you were saying, like support system. The organizing that I've felt that I've been involved with is just a big support system. People that can help uplift you or are like-minded towards the issues that you care about. So that's what I feel like the community that I'm involved with, that I can commiserate with them. I feel like that we are aligned in the same issues and policies that I also believe in. So yeah, I'm wondering with you, well, there was a question on upbringing. I wanted to find out from upbringing on what ignites you to even get up in the morning and be like, okay, I need to do something about the community. I need to rally in front of the consulate. I need to get a petition for everyone to support World War II veterans. Like, what is it about your upbringing that ignites you to do that work?
I believe we all have a basic sense of justice.
Were your parents activists?
No, actually, I was the only activist in the family, so they're wondering where I came from.
Does that cause any tension?
Initially, but I think it is specifically the conditions of my family and my family's experiences that pushed me to become an activist. My grandmother was a long-time OFW in Saudi. My grandfather was a regular laborer. But despite all of their hard work, our lives didn't really, become, if you work hard, you'll be rich. It didn't become like that, until my mom worked as a, in a bake shop, but she was fired for the effort of trying to organize and build, advocate for their working conditions. And that really opened my eyes that, like, there has to be, we need to do something, right? And then
So
when
your mother was an organizer within her bake shop, within her
she's
milling,
she's
right?
not the lead organizer,
not,
but
okay.
like, as a worker who understands that life is hard and we need to, earn more.
There's probably a difference between being an activist and being like just paying back or giving back. Is there such a difference? It's like, I just want to help. Like when I did the FIOS, the immigrant, or maybe the ARC.
It depends on how they define it.
It's giving back to the community, or if helping the OFWs who were human trafficked or who were victims of human trafficking, figuring out how to get them.
Activists are more committed.
I think activism, you're getting your voice out there, like changing policies. Is that right?
And also being more committed, like you would give of your personal life to the cause. I've seen a lot of activists
But see,
that
I personally wouldn't identify as an activist. I call myself a community leader. And activist to me is like a title that I feel is, I just don't identify with.
Does it have like a negative term if you say activist?
It can
Not
be, but
really,
for me,
not
What do
really.
you think?
I don't.
Hear,
I
Stevens.
think I'm going back to when I was with organizing with the students. That's when I guess I came out of when I was with President Stoneybrook, and then with FANA, doing all the Filipino student organizations and networks. And then at that time, definitely I was like, oh, look at all the organizers we have. But when you're trying to recruit and bring people in to what you're doing, I remember organizer was such a word they didn't want to hear. They're like, wait, no, I'm not an organizer, and definitely not an activist in their head, but these are community leaders you want to
Yeah.
bring in. So we started saying student leaders, and then more people came to the meetings.
You think that's a
There is
loaded
an
word?
term. I think
And
when
now
you
It's
say
I think it's
activist,
more
yeah.
emotional, right?
Probably.
But didn't
It's like
you
more-
in the past or even currently say, oh, why aren't they doing enough? Why aren't
activists?
why aren't you going out there and rallying like for Black Lives Matter? Some people I've heard like,
I know.
oh, why didn't you show up at the parade?
Filipinos?
Yeah.
People tell you that?
No, not me personally, but I'm saying in general, like people have
Expectations,
experienced
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think it's well, with Black Lives Matter, that's a whole different, but it's also the same. How do you identify the Filipino American experience or Filipino experience with the Black African American community here in America, which has 400 years of
Yeah.
stress and this history that comes behind it. I participated in the first the freedom rides, the Black Lives Matter freedom rides a few years ago to Ferguson, and I was the only Filipino coming from the Northeast on that. I was the only non-black in the bus going, non-black
the only
person.
Filipino?
Not yet. Only non-black person
Oh, okay,
coming from
yeah.
the Northeast over there. I think there was one other Filipino. I think a PhD in Berkeley that was over there, but definitely, and just seeing how the struggles, because I've also seen the protests of like urban poor in Manila, and it's the same. You could see it's the same conditions, and going back to your point of like how come Filipino Americans here would they be interested in
Right.
what's going there and the
Yeah,
issues,
yeah.
because a lot of them are the same, and if it might not be in your community directly, but there are communities that a lot of Filipino Americans are living in every day, in which that economic instability, that political instability affects them every day, especially nowadays with immigration shakedowns.
You know what I'd like to see is a Filipino American activist who, when, like there is that limo driver who was killed in Queens, I'd like to see an activist really raise hell in front of NYPD. There was that Filipina girl who was bullied and then committed suicide. I wanted the Filipino American activist to raise hell in front of the school district, something like an Al Sharpton within our community.
Which is just
I'd
like
like to see something
immigration.
like that, huh?
Look at immigration. I mean, a lot of people.
It has to
come
be
here-
specific. I think, Jenny, it has to be specific
Like
cases.
on a case?
Like there is a specific case, somebody was killed
You
because
look
he
at
was a fan of
TPS,
Pacquiao.
right? I mean, I'm saying that's one. I
About
don't think
crystals.
we're.
You mean
Yeah,
crystals,
yeah, that
right?
one. We were there, right?
How many people? How many Filipino Americans are killed in this country every day or every month? I have no idea.
Me too. Yeah.
So maybe that's why we're not rallying against that. But then, what's the number one problem of the Filipinos here? Isn't it immigration or human trafficking?
I guess it depends
or,
on what organization you speak to.
Just because we're saying the number one issue is A, doesn't mean we can't also prioritize B, C, D, E. It depends, especially if organizations are specialized already, because we have one dealing with we have lawyers that do public interest, we have organizations that do social events, organizations that are to your profession. I mean, we can say, how come that girl was bullied and she committed
Yeah,
suicide,
she
right?
committed suicide. yeah.
What organization?
Whatever happened to? I don't know.
I didn't see a similar
Maybe
thing.
because there's not one organization that anybody could
Because
go
there's
to and
no
say, is there
organization
an
that
organization
wants
that
to
would
pick
be
up this cause.
No, maybe there's so many
here's also the thing.
organizations.
No,
regret.
I'll take it back. No, under NAFA, we were trying to pick up that cause, but
What
trying
happened?
to rally people around that topic. It's new and it's not familiar for especially. I would say more seasoned community leaders. This is not an issue that they prioritize.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about bullying.
Bullying, especially if that's like not your children's age. That might
Right.
be your grandchildren's age, and at that point, you're like, what's going on? But there is no intersection. A lot of the community leaders that can say something won't say something about that, but they'll say something about B, C, D, and E. They won't go and say
We
in
have
front of the
community
NYPD.
leaders like
Yeah.
you and Yves who are young and who can say something about it. You guys want to pick that up?
Yeah, I believe, like
Okay.
other organizations. I think it's also, I think it's not true that Filipino Americans are not, engaging in significant numbers in activism. I think there is significant number of
Yeah.
Filipino Americans engaging in activism in various issues. I think we just have to look for them. And I mean, specifically in this bullying, some organizations, NAFA, National Alliance for Filipino Concerns, also tried to reach
Yeah.
out. And I think we just have to look for. There's a lot.
I think
let me just say, going off what Yves is saying, because I agree. A lot of it is what your question. Why doesn't me and Yves pick it up? I mean,
Only because you're the ones in front of me.
no, but like other people pick it up. That's fine. But that's a lot of stress on people's shoulders that already has time commitments that we're talking about that's maxed out. And to add another thing, is that unfair? And we would love to do it, but here's the number one issue I have here in the community: the infrastructure is not there. Okay, so if I wanted to do A, B, C campaign, how many organizations are listed in the Northeast that are Filipino organizations? How many of them would work together?
Shouldn't it be a
300.
NAFA thing? It's a national organization, a National Association of Filipino American
National
Organizations.
Federation of
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
So
yes,
shouldn't-
yes.
so
I
maybe
agree, but
the
there's
goal
different
is to
levels
make them all one.
for NAF. Excuse me, what was that?
Can we make them all into one under
Yeah,
you?
you're the
Oh,
one
hey,
Can you say,
ideally,
okay, for us
yeah.
to have a strong voice, we have to have one united organization, and then like strengthen numbers as opposed to multiple
I
things.
agree, maybe, but I don't know if that would be in the form of NAFA. That could be something else, or it would be NAFA. Who knows? But then that's stepping into the jungle of, hey, come under my organization.
Yeah.
Why?
So that's
No,
never
I'm
going to
fine
change.
over
I think
here.
we've talked
No,
about that before.
I think eventually it's going to change, but here's what the issue, and this is not just with Filipino. I think there's a lot of community organizers and advocates. There's been a sharp line that's being drawn between like people who want to see Al Sharpton, a Filipino Al Sharpton, and those that are now who there is no lead. Like you can see Occupy Wall Street, where who is the one person? It's more of the community. Also, the books like the Leaderless Revolution going on. You could read. There's a stark generational shift where we're not looking for one person to be that voice.
I think there was
agree.
when I was saying before, there was a defining moment where there had the typhoon, and I feel like that was an example
Everybody
where
came
Everyone got
wanted to
together.
collaborate. Everyone
Yeah.
had that sense of, okay, we could work together.
But it's so easy to advocate for a typhoon because there is no
But we
political
have to
cost
figure
to
out
it.
the root
It's so
of
easy to
why.
raise funds. We are the best fundraisers in the ethnic community. We do very well with fundraising.
I
That is
think
so,
we
but
have to
if
work
you
on our-
take a
our
position
It's
on
really
something
hard because everyone
like
has
crime,
their own. Everyone
if
they
you
have
take a
their
position
own.
on something like crime and having to deal with NYPD.
But who's to say that that should be priority and not World War II veterans?
Well, here's also what I just want to put out there. There's a lot of things going on. I was saying there's different silos of people doing this campaign,
Yes.
this campaign. They're not working together. Just finished a book I recommended. So one of it is saying, hey, how come? What are the 4 species in the world that lasted through this whole thing? Okay.
What book is this?
What is this?
What book is this?
The Social Conquest of Earth.
Okay.
Okay. So it's insects and human beings, okay, and bees and ants. Okay, there's the 4 things, okay. And why? Because these are the only 4 through this whole time that cooperate with each other. Everyone else do not. Okay, and the difference between human beings is that we have a conscience and a conscience. So we could also put that in. If we can put that into the Filipino community, and so we could expand the definition of, hey, who are we, and shorten the definition of who are they, then maybe we could actually solve a problem and form a national thing, if possible, maybe international.
So just closing it up, I know it's got really heated, but I need to close up some closing remarks. Last minute thoughts. What is one piece of advice that you'd like to give other community members to strive for unity and advancement for the Filipino community as a whole? What advice do you have?
I mean, it's a lot of things, like it's for someone to start off and try and, be involved in the community. And I think, folks just really need to, take the challenge. Our generation, there's a lot of issues like as has been pointed out, and I think our generation has a lot, can do a lot of things, and I think we just need to take the challenge and, step forward.
I think a big thing I learned is put yourself in spaces that you normally would be uncomfortable with, or events you maybe not uncomfortable with, but you don't want to go to. And there's always positive things I see coming out of that. Recently, I've been going to a lot of Pagasa events. and you
The
would
senior
see
organization.
how many former advocates and community leaders that go
Are
there
there.
are part of Pagasa members.
Wow.
I'm sitting there and they're talking about how starting the first direct service organization in the 80s for Filipino Americans, or talking about they advocated or were protesters in the Philippines and martial law. Like there's a lot of people that were there. I'm like, so much knowledge in this
That's
in this
true.
room, and we're just drinking coffee. Like what is
Yeah.
Well, is there room? Is there time for us to like? How do you insert your personal life? Like, how do you have a little time? I mean, between work, your day job, advocacy.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Like, is this your daytime job? Just curious.
Yeah, I work as a
Relationships?
community organizer still as an
Full time.
economic
Are you?
job.
Is that a full time job?
Yeah, dealing with immigration issues. But I think social life and organizing are not separate. Personal is political. I have a girlfriend, and we, and I still have a lot of friends. So I
Do you have
think
to have a
didn't lose any
girlfriend?
friends yet.
Do you have to have a girlfriend who's also an activist?
she is also an activist.
Oh.
But I think you just need to have a partner that can commiserate and understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't have to be an organizer.
Do you agree, Steve?
This is another episode. I can't.
What I'd like to see is an organization that deals with Filipinos or crime victims. And I don't see any of that in the community. I'd like to throw that out.
Why don't you start?
Okay, here's an issue that I
Okay.
have. Every time someone has a good idea, the first response I get is, "Okay, you can do it."
Exactly.
It's always I don't want to bring my ideas
I
out.
know.
I have like, and it's, okay, you do it.
Yeah, I mean there are like specific crimes, right? Like
Specific
trafficking is a huge crime being committed in
Yeah,
our
but that's,
community, and there's a lot
yeah.
of organizations that's dealing with that.
But regular
We
crimes
have a lot
like
of lawyers,
somebody.
don't we? In the
I don't
community.
know.
So just closing it up, thank you again for joining us here at Makilala TV. And be sure to check us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And of course, follow MNN. Sa ulitin.